Hello, perfect. All right, everybody, it's about time to get started. Thank you all for coming this morning to the second advanced encryption session. We have a great lineup of talks today, starting with Ranji, who's going to tell us about compact and tightly selective opening secure public key encryption schemes.
Thank you for your introduction. I'm Renji Zhen, and I will introduce our new paper, Compact and Tightly Selective Opening Secure Public Key Encryption Schemes. And this is joint work with my supervisor, Jiaxin Pine. And so let's start. And okay, so in the public key setting, we have a receiver, and the receiver have a public key and secret key. And we also get a bunch of senders. The senders can increase some messages using some randomness and send them ciphertext to the receiver. And now we consider a stronger setting that the messages, some senders message and randomness are revealed to some adversary. And we say a ciphertext is open if its message and randomness are revealed to the adversary. And so because if the ciphertext is open, its security is totally broken because this is all the secret information about the ciphertext. So now we asked, so some open ciphertext is no longer secure, but how about the unopened ciphertext? Do the unopened ciphertext remain secure? And so the sender selective openness security considers such setting. In the SO setting, the adversary can get a bunch of challenge ciphertext, and it can also open some of the challenge ciphertext. And the SO security requires that the unopened challenge ciphertext remains secure. And the SO security is very practical because in the real world setting, the sender's computer may be corrupted by some hacker, and the hacker get any information about the sender, including messages and the randomness. And also sometimes the sender will use some insecure randomness generator. And so the adversary can recover the randomness. And the selected SO security has a long study history. And it can be dated back to the paper in 1999, a magic function. And there's also a lot of works have been done in studying the right definitions for SO security and the relations between the SO security definitions. And there are two flavors of SO security notion. We just consider the CCA setting. The first one is the indistinguishability-based SO security, and the second one is the simulation-based one. It turns out that the SIM-SO implies a weak notion of the IMD-SO. So here we just focus on the SIM-SO security. So let's see how to define the real GAN and the, so in the simulation-based SO security, we need to define real GAN and ideal GAN. In the real GAN plays with the adversary, and the adversary in the real GAN model the real world scenario for the adversary. And the ideal GAN plays with a simulator S, and the S can just learn trivial information in the ideal GAN. So let's see how to define the real GAN. In the real GAN, we generate a public key and secret key and send the public key to the adversary. And then the adversary need to choose some distribution B and get back to the GAN. Of course, because we consider CCA security, the adversary can also curious the decryption oracle. And after receiving the distribution, the GAN will sample N messages from the distribution and N randomness from some randomness space. And then they use these messages and randomness to generate N challenge ciphertext, and then send back this N ciphertext to the adversary A. And after receiving the challenge ciphertext, the adversary can choose some challenge ciphertext to be open. Namely, it just send an index, and then the GAN need to return the messages and the randomness of the ith challenge ciphertext. And the GAN also record what ciphertext have been opened by the adversary using the list I. And finally, the adversary need to produce some output, out A, and the real GAN will record the distribution output by A and then sample the messages from the distribution and the opening index output by adversary and the final output of adversary. And they just output all of this thing as when the scan end. So to define the ideal GAN, we just delete all the non-trivial information. In the ideal GAN, we do not have public key, we do not have challenge ciphertext, we do not have decryption oracle. And so in the ideal GAN, it's played with the simulator, and the simulator still needs to output some distribution, and everything is similar to the real GAN, except that we delete all the non-trivial information. And note that the ideal GAN need to return the length of the message to the simulator, because the length of the message is almost the minimal information the ciphertext can review. And so to prove a scheme is SIM-SOCC secure, we just show that for any adversary attacking this scheme, there exists a simulator as both RTPT, such that the output distribution produced by these two GAN are indistinguishable, computationally indistinguishable. And namely, it just proved that there exists a simulator S that it can simulate the behavior of the adversary. For example, they choose the send message distribution or send ciphertext and produce send output. And it turns out that the SIM-SOCC security is strictly stronger than the normal security, like the IND-CCA. And it's a non-trivial to achieve SIM-SOCC security, because normally, if we want to prove the security, we need to embed some problem instance into the ciphertext. But if you embed some instance to the ciphertext, then the ciphertext is not under our control, so we cannot return the randomness. For example, one may wonder if we can use the hybrid argument plus the IND-CCA scheme to achieve SIM-SOCC security. And such method does not work, because in the hybrid argument, we want to switch all the challenge ciphertext to random, switch them one by one. But if we switch the ciphertext to random, then we cannot open C1, the random ciphertext, because it's not under the reductions control. So one may also wonder if we can use a guess technique to deal with such problem. Guess technique means that we just guess which challenge ciphertext will not open by the adversary. And this technique will may work in some cases, but because it guesses which ciphertext will not be opened by the adversary, and it may guess wrong. And then there's a failing probability, and then so it leads to some non-type reduction. So here I would like to introduce something about the tightness. So normally to prove security, we need to establish some relations. Like if there is an adversary to break the scheme, then we can also have another adversary to break some underlying problem. So here in the equation, the epsilon A capture the security of the scheme, and the epsilon P capture the hardness of the hard problem. And we also have sometimes we will have some factor L, and L we call this L as a security loss. And we say the security reduction is tight if the L is some constant. And we say the reduction is non-tight if the L depends on some other resource of the adversary, like the number of challenge ciphertext or number of R queries from the adversary. So why we care about tightness? Because sometimes if we want to choose a provable secure parameter, we need to choose a appropriate security parameter such that the epsilon P is very small, so that the epsilon A is also small. But if the L is very large, then we need to choose a larger security parameter to make the epsilon P small enough. And larger security parameter will lead to some higher computation overhead or the communication overhead. And so can we have SIM-SOCC scheme with tight security? Answer is yes, but it's not very satisfactory. And there are some group-based SIM-SO PKEs with tight security. But these schemes, they are all either have a long ciphertext or the long public key. Long public key means that the number of, because here we just care about the group-based scheme. The long public key means that the number of group elements in the public key is not constant. It depends on the length of message. And the drawback of the non-compact scheme is that it will have the high communication overhead. So in our work, we want to solve this problem. Can we have a SIM-SOCC scheme achieves high security, compact public key, and the compact ciphertext at the same time? And we observe that this question is very hard in the standard model, because if we want to achieve high security, we need to push the non-tightness to the size of the public key or the size of the ciphertext. And this is why the construction in the standard model are not compact. So, and we also observe that no such scheme exists in the random oracle model. So now we want to relax the requirements. Can we have such a scheme in the random oracle model? And this work gives a positive answer. In our paper, we propose 3 direct constructions and a generic construction. The direct constructions are based on some Diffie-Hellman assumptions, and the generic construction is based on a Fujisaki Okamoto transformation. And we just require the underlying PKE to be lossy encryption. And in this talk, I just briefly introduce the key idea of our first direct construction. So let's start by considering the DHIES scheme in HAKS 15. So the public key is G to the X and secret key is small x. And to encrypt the plaintext M, we just sample some randomness, some exponent R, and compute the group element big R, and compute the shared Diffie-Hellman value Z, and use Z to derive 2 keys. And we use the first key to do encryption, and use the second key to do the message code, the message authentication code. So in the DHIES scheme, the ciphertext has this form, and the randomness is just the exponent, small r. So how they prove the SIM-SOCC security of this scheme? They just use the multi-challenge strong Diffie-Hellman assumption. And because in SIM-SOCC security, there are unchallenged ciphertexts. So they just directly embed the problem instant into the challenge ciphertext. But as I said, if they just embed the just embed the problem instance into the challenge ciphertext, then it cannot open because the small I are unknown. So this is why the reduction is non-tight, because they need to use the guess technique guess technique. They just guess which ciphertext will not be open. So they have the security loss big O(n). And here the RO does not help for tightness. And so how we solve this problem? So our approach is to use what we call dual nonunion technique. And here the DHIES has the ciphertext as this form. And we just slightly modify the ciphertext, the form of ciphertext. Now in our scheme, the ciphertext will have 2 group elements. And of course we have two exponents. So now in our scheme, the 2 keys are derived from one of the CDH values. So the key is computed by the HB and R0, R1 and PK, and the CDH value of PK and the bit RB. Here the B is a random bit. So, but this is not enough, because even if you modify the ciphertext to have this form, we will still run into the similar problem with the DHIES scheme. So here we need to forget the D-log. We forget the D-log. Because forget D-log means that if we can simulate the reduction without in the D-log, then we can do reduction. Because in reduction, we will not have the D-log. So here we just use a so-called oblivious randomness. Oblivious randomness, namely, for example, if you want to sample the random group element, we can just compute the exponent and then compute the generator to the exponent. But if the group is sampleable, is efficiently sampleable, then we can just sample the group element from this group. So this is what we call oblivious randomness, and these two methods is indistinguishable. So the randomness in our ciphertext has this form: a random bit B and the exponent RB, small rb, and the group element BR1 minus B. And why the advantage of using oblivious randomness is that we can use such oblivious randomness to respond to open queries. So let's see how it works. For example, if R0, if we do not know the D-log of the big R0, we just return the one small R1 and big R0. It means that if you do not know the exponent of the RB, the big RB, we just view it as an oblivious randomness and return it. So to prove the proof of our scheme works as follows. We just use we also use the multi-challenge strong development assumption, and we embed the challenge into R0 or R1. And now we can open any challenge ciphertext. For example, we just return the B prime and small r B prime and big R1 minus B prime. If the small 1 minus B, if the small R1 minus B prime is unknown. And of course, our reduction involves some reprogram, the RO reprogram, because we need to make sure that the returning randomness is consistent with the ciphertext. So our schemes based on DHIS, and use the dual nominal technique, and also use the oblivious randomness to forget the D-log. So now they can open any challenge ciphertext, and it did not need to guess, and so it can have a time reduction. And here's a comparison with some group-based SOCCPKE, and our schemes will have achieved the tight security, compact ciphertext, and compact public key in the random oracle model at the same time. So finally, let's get back to the problem. So now we give a positive answer of this problem in the random oracle model, but the open problems still remain because we still do not have such scheme in the standard model, and we hope that our work can helpful to the future study of this problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Runzi. Are there any questions for our speaker? All right, well, if there are no questions, then I'll ask a quick question. Yeah. Do you think we could get a similarly tight construction from lattice assumptions?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, we have some progress in moving our technique to the lattice-based scheme, but it's still random oracle model. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot. Any last chance at questions? Okay, well, let's thank the speaker again, please.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, I think you're good. Are you all set and ready to go?
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Well, our next talk is identity-based matchmaking encryption from standard assumptions, and Yuli will be giving the talk. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Yu Li, and in this talk, I will show you our work on building identity-based matchmaking encryption scheme under the standard assumptions in the standard model. This is a joint work with Jie Chen, Jin Mingwen, and Jian Wong. Let's start with the introduction of identity-based matchmaking encryption, short for IBME. It was proposed by Atanis et al. In Crypto 2019. Here are an authority, a sender, and a receiver. The authority first initializes the system and produces the master public key, MPK, and the master secret key, MSK. It uses the MSK to generate the senders and the receivers' secret keys with their attributes or identities respectively. Then the sender will specify an identity of the receiver on the fly and encrypt the message with his own secret key and the receiver's identity. After receiving the ciphertext, the receiver will also specify an identity of the sender he wants to receive from. Decryption algorithm will test if the four identities satisfy each other. If yes, the receiver will get the correct message. This is the identity-based matchmaking encryption, where both the sender and the receiver with their own attributes can specify fine-grained access policies the other party must satisfy in order for the message to be reviewed. Formally speaking, the identity-based matchmaking encryption consists of 5 algorithms. The setup algorithm generates the master public key and the master secret key. SKG algorithm generates the encryption key, EK sigma, for the sender with his identity sigma. And the RKG algorithm generates the decryption key, DK row, for the receiver with his identity row. Encryption key EK sigma, a receiver's identity RCV, and a message M will be used in the encrypt algorithm and output the ciphertext. Decryption key DK row and the sender's identity SND with his ciphertext CT are used in decryption algorithm to get the message or not. Then we review the related work of IBME. The two typical concerns on the security of matchmaking encryption are the security model and the underlying assumption. For the security model, there are 2 important models, random oracle model and standard model. The 2 kinds of assumptions in use are dynamic and static assumption. Generally speaking, the static assumption is weaker and less complex than the Q-type assumption. We pursue schemes under static assumptions, and only for security, it would be better to have a scheme probable in the standard model. The concept of IBME was proposed by Atanis et al. In 2019, and they give the first work under BDH assumption, but in the random oral. Then Francati et al. Proposed the first construction in the plain model, but under Q-type assumption in 2021. So it remains the problem, can we build an IBME scheme under the standard assumptions in the standard model? In this work, we solve it and give the first construction under the SXDH assumption in the standard model. We propose a new technique for designing IBME scheme. Our construction is direct and does not rely on other crypto tools. We start our idea with the security definition of IBME. It is combined with privacy and authenticity. We will discuss these 2 definitions separately. For those who are very familiar with anonymous identity-based encryption, if there is no SKG in the game-based definition of privacy, this property is almost the same as that of anonymity in IBE. There are 2 main differences between them. First, the adversary output two tuples in IBME while two identities in IBE during the challenge phase. We can view this as two sets of identities are changed during the challenge phase. Then this has little or has no effect. Second, there is an additional SK gene in IBME, but not in IBE. Since it is run by the IBME system and returns the result back to the adversary, it also has almost no effect. As for authenticity, we think of it as similar to unforgeability in signatures. For those who are very familiar with public key signatures, there are also many similarities between those two definitions. They have the same setup phase and the same challenge tuples. We don't give M and CT concrete meanings, just consider it as two strings. So the challenge tuple consists of the same kinds of identities and strings, and they all have the same verification phase. So we know that anonymous IBE and signature can be used to build IBME scheme. And we have known that an IBE scheme can be immediately converted into a public key signature scheme. With these two strong connections, we can use a two-level IBE with anonymity to form our construction. We present a variant of two-level IBE to satisfy the same functionality of IBME. The algorithm Asiacrypt and Encrypt associated by identities row and RCV are the first level, while the second level consists of the algorithm Asiacrypt and Decrypt associated by identities sigma and SND. This two-level AIBE corresponds to the two security requirements of IBME respectively. Privacy property of IBME relies on the anonymity of this two-level IBE, while the authenticity is corresponding to the unforgeability in the second level. When building this two-level construction, we choose trans AIBE as our foundation. This specific construction relies on Okamoto and Takushima's dual pairing vector spaces, and both security reductions rely on vertex-dual system encryption. We need to make some modifications to trans IBE and signature scheme first, and we will ignore MPK and MSK afterward. First, we cannot use the same parameters in IBE and signatures. So we need to replace alpha with eta and replace two before victories. At the same time, instead of signing message M, we sign identity RD in the second level. This is after the change. Next, we have to decide where to put our four identities. According to this two-level construction, row and RCV must be embedded in SK and CT respectively in AIBE. And sigma and SND must be embedded in sign and verify in the signature. So we consider SK and ink in IBE as our RK and ink in IBME, sign in signature as SK in IBME, and decrypt in AIBE and verify in signature together as the decryption algorithm in IBME. Finally, we noticed that the sigma needs to be used in encrypt and the row is a parameter of decryption. So we need to keep the elements in encrypt and SK from the same group and the same as elements in RK and decrypt. We modify the group and the vector in the signature to their duals respectively. By now, our preparations have been completed, and we need to combine these two separate schemes together and apply them in the context of IBME as mentioned above. But there is still a problem. How do we use SND to verify the signature in the second level for sigma? We noticed it is the decay row and SND used in the decryption algorithm. And we can embed the verify algorithm in RKGene with decay row. And identity SND is given in decrypt algorithm. We should split the verification part into two segments by SND. And we have tried that, merge G2 D3 star into the former and leave G2 D4 star alone. But the random numbers during the security proof are not enough to cover these 4 victories. So we have to copy a slice of the vector D1 star and D2 star and let SND be something like a delegation element. After being delegated in the decryption algorithm, the two parts of key can merge together in the decryption algorithm. So in RKGene, D3 star and D4 star looks like 2 independent keys of trees. Here are our decryption key decay row. Finally, we sort out the parameters plus the public secret key pairs and form our completed construction. Next, we prove this scheme satisfies the 2 security requirements of an IBME at the same time, and we're starting with privacy. After the previous analysis of security, we can almost prove the privacy property of IBME as well as we proved AIB. Following Waters' dual system encryption method, we can easily prove our scheme satisfies privacy with a little modification. We first give a semi-functional ciphertext generation algorithm, and then process the decryption key. Since we have considered K1 and K2 in decay row as 2 independent keys, we will generate semi-function secret keys for them separately. In this case, we introduce the concept of inter-semi-function secret key, where only K1 is semi-functional and K2 remains normal. Then we generate the semi-functional keys of K2, and now both K1 and K2 are all semi-functional. Then we present a sequence of schemes to prove our scheme satisfies privacy. Game real is the real game, and we transfer ciphertext into semi-functional in game 0. K1 are changed into semi-functional in game kappa 1. And K2 are turned into semi-functional in game kappa 2. In game final, we use a semi-functional decryption of a random message under 2 random identities. We will prove that these schemes are indistinguishable from each other by a series of lemmas as Waters and Chengdu. As for authenticity, since we have known that the affordability of signatures can be reduced to the security of IBE, we can follow the same method. We build an IBE scheme and assume that there is a PPT adversary A that breaks the authenticity property with non-negligible advantages. So we can employ another adversary B to break this secure IBE. After initiating the system, B sends some identities to IBE for querying secret keys. At the same time, A sends the same identities to Oracle 1. Oracle 1 is SKGene Oracle for querying encryption keys in IBME. Then A can output a table with his advantages of breaking authenticity of IBME. This identity sigma is not the same as all the identities paired. A sends sigma to B and continues to create Oracle 1 for EK sigma. Then B gives this sigma and 2 message to IB for challenge. B can win this IB game easily by getting EK sigma from A. We have that B can win this game with a non-negligible advantages. That's to say, we use this identity sigma to reduce the authenticity of IBME to the security of this IBE system. It can be found in the full version of our paper that the IBE is secure, meaning that the advantages of B winning the IBE game is negligible. So we have proved the authenticity property of IBME. So in this work, we built the first IBME scheme under the standard assumptions in the standard model by giving a variety of 2-level anonymous IBE. We mainly employ dual pairing vector spaces and dual system encryption during construction and the security proof. Some improvements and open questions can be done on this topic. First, the size of parameters in our scheme should be shorter, and the numbers of pairing of decryption should be reduced to improve efficiency. Second, practical extensions such as workability and traceability may be future works. Third, lattice-based realization based on LWE can be done in the future. That's all. Thank you for your attention. And the full version of this paper can be found at imprint. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Yu. Does anybody have any questions for you? All right. Well, if no one has a question, then I'll ask another question then. Do you think there are practical applications of identity-based matchmaking encryption? And if you do, can you elaborate a little bit?
The first construction of IBME proposed in Crypto 2019. He has supplied several applications of IBME or matchmaking, namely ME. This notion is mainly for the context of needs strong privacy and authenticity. So and in our work, it actually don't have high efficiency, so we don't focus on this construction too mainly, and we will transfer to lattice-based IBME realizations in IBME.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for your question. Does anyone else have any more questions? Okay. If not, let's thank you again. Thanks a lot, Yu.
Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can see your slides on the Zoom, but I can't see
Okay.
them on the big screen yet. There we go. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Are you
Can you
ready
see
to
the
go?
slides? Can
Yep.
you see the slides?
We can. I think we're all set
Okay.
now.
Okay, okay,
Awesome.
that's good.
Great. Well, let's get started.
Oh,
So
okay.
our next speaker is Zhenghan Wang, and he's going to talk about anonymous public key
Well, hello,
encryption.
I'm Zhenghan Huang from Pengcheng Lab. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Hello, I'm Zhenghan Huang from Pengcheng Lab. Today I will talk about anonymous public key encryption and corruptions. This is a joint work with Junzhe Lai, Shuai Han, Lin Lu, and Jian Wang. Firstly, I will introduce some background information. For public key encryption and corruptions, both the secret keys and messages could be leaked. As far as we know, the first notion of anonymity for PKE and corruptions is proposed by Behamoda et al. In 2020. In their work, anonymous CLR secure and ISO secure PKE is employed to build an involving committee proactive secret sharing scheme. Unfortunately, there are some problems left. No PKE achieves anonymous CLR security. In the game defining their security, the adversary is not allowed to obtain any secret key before seeing ciphertext. And each public key is used to encrypt a single message. Moreover, both confidentiality and anonymity under corruptions are needed to build an ECP-SS scheme. But we noticed that for ISO security, the adversary is able to open a specified subset of the challenge ciphertext. And for anonymous CLR security, the adversary does not have this kind of ability. So these two security notions are formalized under different types of corruptions. Focusing on this problem, we define anonymous ISO K and C security for PKE, which stands for anonymity under receiver selective opening attacks in the K challenge setting and adaptive user corruptions. And then we define a confidentiality notion under the same types of corruptions. Finally, we show a framework of constructing PKE achieving both anonymous and confidential ISO K and C CCA security. Now let's turn to the definition of anonymous ISO K and C security. This is a simulation-based security. In the real game, there are totally n public keys. The adversary specifies a public key distribution and TK challenge messages. The public key distribution samples T of the n public keys, and each public key will be used to encrypt K messages. The adversary knows all the encrypted messages, but he does not know which public keys are used for encryption exactly. The adversary can make two kinds of oracle queries, the user corruption query and the selective opening query. For the user corruption query, the adversary queries on I and receives SKI. For the selective opening query, the adversary queries on J and receives SKIJ, which means that he asks to open the J ciphertext tuple. In the ideal game, there are no encryptions here. So the public keys here are useless, and we use the indices of the public keys to replace the public keys. The simulator does not have any ciphertext as input. So he has no information about the indices of the public keys corresponding to the unopened and uncorrupted users. We require that this tuple and this tuple are indistinguishable. That's how we formalize the notion of anonymous ISO K and C security. Well, confidentiality notion under the same types of corruptions are similarly defined. The main difference here is that we replace the public key distribution with a message distribution, and all the other details are modified accordingly. In this talk, I will only focus on anonymity and skip over the results about confidentiality. For relations among security notions, we show that anonymous ISO K and C CPA security implies anonymous CLR security, and the corresponding confidentiality implies the standard ISO K security. For constructions, our goal is to show a PKE scheme achieving both anonymous ISO-K and C CCA security and confidential ISO-K and C CCA security. To achieve this goal, we propose a new primitive called Key and Message Non-Committing Encryption, KMNCE, and use this primitive to show a PKE achieving these two security requirements. And then we use a new primitive key openable hash proof system to construct KMNCE. This is the technical overview of our construction. Now let me introduce the primitive of KMNCE. A traditional PKE consists of 3 PPT algorithms. For a KMNCE scheme in the K-challenge setting, the key generation algorithm will additionally generate a trapdoor key, TK. And there are 2 additional PPT algorithms, the fake algorithm and the open algorithm. The fake algorithm, without taking any public key as input, outputs a fake ciphertext and its corresponding trapdoor. The open algorithm takes a public key, a secret key, a trapdoor key, and K fake ciphertext and their corresponding trapdoors, and K messages as input, and outputs a new secret key. We want to use the open algorithm to open K fake ciphertext to any K messages. This property will be guaranteed by the following security requirement. We define 2 kinds of security requirements for KMNCE. The first one is KMNC CPA or CCA security, and the second one is robustness. Here, we call the secret key generated with the key generation algorithm as the original secret key, and call the ciphertext generated with the encryption algorithm as the real ciphertext, and call the ciphertext generated with the fake algorithm as the fake ciphertext. KMNC CPA security requires that for any K messages, the original secret key and K real ciphertext are indistinguishable from an open secret key and K fake ciphertext. The KMNC CCA security is similarly defined. Robustness requires that decrypting a fake ciphertext with the original secret key will lead to an error with overwhelming probability. This is the security requirement we formalized for KMNCE. Now we turn to the construction of anonymous and confidential ISO-K and C secure PKE from KMNCE. For a KMNCE scheme, the first 3 algorithms form a PKE scheme. Well, formally, we have this theorem. If KMNCE is KMNC CPA secure, then this PKE scheme is anonymous ISO-K and C CPA secure and confidential ISO-K and C CPA secure. If KMNCE is CCA secure and robust, then the PKE scheme is anonymous and confidential CCA secure. In this talk, I will introduce the proof about a proof of the anonymous ISO-K and C CPA security. This is the real game of anonymous ISO-K and C CPA security. Note that here, all the challenge ciphertexts are real ciphertexts because they are all generated with the encryption algorithm. And all the secret keys and all the return secret keys via the oracle queries are the original secret keys. This is the ideal game. And this is the construction of the simulator. The main idea of the construction of the simulator is that when generating the challenging ciphertext, for each J, if IJ has been corrupted, here, if IJ has been corrupted, then generate the ciphertext with the encryption algorithm. If IJ has never been corrupted, then generate the ciphertext with the fake algorithm. When answering the adversary's user corruption query or selective opening query, if the received index IJ prime or IJ corresponds to real ciphertext, then return the original secret key as a response. If the received index corresponds to fake ciphertext, then return the open secret key. Return the secret key generated with the open algorithm as a response. That is the main idea of the construction of the simulator. we note that in the real game, all the challenging ciphertexts are real ciphertexts, and all the return secret keys are the original secret keys. In the ideal game, some of the challenging ciphertexts are modified to fake ciphertexts, and some of the return secret keys are modified to open ones. And we have shown that KMNC CPA security requires that the fake ciphertext and the real ciphertext are indistinguishable, and the open secret key and the real secret key are indistinguishable. So we have that the KMNC CPA security will guarantee the ideal game and the real game are also indistinguishable. So we obtain the anonymous ISO KNC CPA security. Next, to construct KMNCE, we need a new primitive called key openable hash pool system. Now we turn to introduce this primitive. Firstly, I will recall the traditional hash pool system. A subset membership problem, SMP, requires that two elements, sample from the subset and the universal set respectively, are indistinguishable. A hash pool system for SMP has a private evaluation algorithm and a public evaluation algorithm. Both these evaluation algorithms are used to compute a hash value. The projectivity requires that a public key can uniquely determine the hash value of any element inside the subset. Now we extend the key openable Now we extend the SMP to multiple SMP. A multiple SMP requires that K elements sample from the subset are indistinguishable from K elements sample from the universal set. A key openable hash pool system has a trapdoor, and there is a new algorithm called H-open algorithm, which takes a trapdoor, a public key, a secret key, and K tuples of pre-image and hash value as input, and outputs a new secret key. We introduce a new property called openability for key openable hash pool system. Let's ignore the details here first, which I put here just for reference. I want to stress that openability are used to guarantee that the H-open algorithm can open K uniformly sample hash values to K uniformly sample pre-images. Okay. Well, another property is also needed. We require that there is a PBT resample algorithm such that for uniformly sample hash value, it can recover the corresponding randomness. We propose a MDDH-based instantiation of key openable hash pool system, which can be seen as a generalization of the DDH-based hash pool system. And for the details, please refer to our full version. Now let's turn to the construction of a KMNCE from key openable hash pool system. This is the detailed construction. For key generation, all the secret key, public key, and trapdoor key are directly from that of the hash pool system. For encryption, firstly sample X from the subset, and then use the public key to compute the hash value, and use the hash value to hide the message. The ciphertext is X and pi. To generate a fake ciphertext, the fake algorithm uniformly sample X and pi, and let the trapdoor be the corresponding randomness Rx. We know that here this X is a sample from the universal set. The open algorithm is the mostly complicated algorithm. For each gamma, firstly compute E as pi minus M, and then use the resample algorithm of the HPS to compute the randomness, and then use the H-open algorithm of the HPS to generate a new secret key and return the new secret key. Now we want to prove this KMNC scheme achieves KMNC CPA security, which recall that KMNC CPA security require that the original secret key and K real ciphertext are indistinguishable from an open secret key and K fixed ciphertext. Now we call this as the real tuple and call this as the fake tuple. In game 0, this is the real tuple. Note that the secret key is the original secret key and all the K ciphertexts are the real ciphertext. Both X is sample from the subset and pi is computed with the public key. And in game 1, each pi is computed with the secret key. So the projectivity of HPS will guarantee that these two games are indistinguishable. In game 2, each X is sample from the universal set. So the multiple SMP guarantee that these two games are also indistinguishable. In game 3, firstly, sample pi from the hash value space, and then compute E as pi minus M, and use the resample algorithm of the HPS to compute randomness, and use the HOpen algorithm to compute a new secret key and put the new secret key here. Well, notice that this is the open algorithm. This part is totally the same as the open algorithm here. So the secret key in game 3 is the open secret key, and all the K ciphertext here are the fake ciphertext because both X and pi are uniformly sampled. So these are fake ciphertext. And so in game 3, this is the fake tuple. And the openability will guarantee that game 2 and game 3 are indistinguishable. So game 0 and game 3 are indistinguishable. And as a result, we obtain that the real tuple and fake tuple are also indistinguishable. That's how we obtain the KMNC CPA security. Well, for the CCA secure KMNC construction, please refer to our paper. To summarize, we formalized the notion of anonymous ISO K and C security for PKE, and the CPA security implies anonymous CLR security. And we also formalized the confidentiality notion of confidentiality notion under the same types of corruptions, and show that this notion implies the standard ISO K security. For constructions, we show a framework of PKE achieving both anonymous and confidential ISO K and C CCA security. The obtained MDDH-based scheme has complex ciphertext and tight security reduction, and it's the first PKE scheme achieving anonymous CLR security. Well, that's all. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks a lot for your talk. Does anyone have any questions for Zhengen?
Hi, I'm Matilda. Thanks for your talk. I have a question about your security definition for anonymous RSO. I was just curious if you can provide some intuition for why you give the adversary corruption oracle before the ciphertext generation happens. So what's the practical reasoning, and what's the implications for the strength of the security notion?
You mean why I give this oracle, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think we think giving this oracle is much natural in applications because in application in practice the adversary it's possible to corrupt the users can corrupt the users at any time before or after seeing the training ciphertext.
So the ciphertext might also be generated from the public keys corresponding to the secret keys which the adversary already corrupted. Is that correct?
Sorry?
So when the ciphertexts are generated, the public keys that are sampled could also include the public keys corresponding to the the secret keys which the adversary already corrupted.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, if not, let's thank Zhengen again.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you all. For the final talk of the session, Akshaya is going to tell us about memory-tight multi-challenge security of public key encryption. So please take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, I'm Akshaya, and this is joint work with my advisor, Joseph Drager. In this work, we give CCA secure encryption schemes with proofs in the multi-user, multi-challenge setting that are tight with respect to time, advantage, and memory. To give ourselves some context, let us start by recalling how we cryptographers like to analyze the security of a scheme. We express the security of a scheme as the adversary in terms of the adversary's advantage. Roughly speaking, the advantage can be viewed as the probability with which the adversary is successful in breaking a scheme. Our perspective in analyzing the advantage function can be asymptotic or concrete. An asymptotic security guarantee looks like this, where both the scheme and the adversary are parameterized by a security parameter, and the scheme is called secure if all polytime adversaries have negligible advantage against the scheme. Such a notion of security raises ambiguity about the security guarantees of the scheme when actually instantiating it. To avoid this ambiguity, we use concrete security, where we fix an instance of a scheme and then express the adversary's advantage in terms of its resources. This allows us to visualize a trade-off between the amount of resources that an adversary is willing to throw at a problem and its likelihood in succeeding in breaking it. This is shown by this resource versus advantage plot for some adversary A. We are then able to express the security of a scheme as the amount of resources that an adversary needs to have advantage close to 1. Traditionally, the most commonly considered resource in concrete security analysis is computational time. But in practice, there are other resources that are also important. As shown by this very subtle hint, in this talk, we will be talking about why memory is important in the concrete security analysis of schemes and how we can incorporate it. Such analysis is often based on cryptographic reductions. A reduction turns an adversary attacking a scheme S into an algorithm that solves a problem, a better understood hard problem P. To do this, the reduction runs the adversary as a subroutine and simulates the scheme to the adversary. The reduction then uses the responses and outputs of the adversary to solve the problem P. Ultimately, our goal is to derive bounds that relate the advantage and resources of the reduction to that of the adversary. The tightness of a reduction measures how good or efficient the reduction is. Roughly speaking, a reduction is called tight if it is able to preserve the advantage and resource consumption of the original adversary. To see why tightness is important in concrete security analysis, let us look at this resource versus success probability plot for some hard problem P. We separate the plot into regions that we call broken and unbroken for the problem P. If a point lies in the unbroken region, it means that currently we do not have any algorithms that can efficiently solve the problem P with corresponding resources. Let's say we want a scheme that is secure against all adversaries constrained in resources by this point A. If we have a reduction that uses significantly greater resources, we end up with an algorithm whose resources suffice to break the problem P. This means that we cannot derive any meaningful conclusions about the security of our scheme. If instead we have a tight reduction, we see that we get an algorithm that is still in the unbroken region for problem P. And now we can derive meaningful conclusions about the security of our scheme based on the problem's hardness. Specifically in our work, we consider, as we pointed out earlier, the most commonly considered resource is computational time. And in our work, we also consider memory. This is important specifically for memory-sensitive problems or problems that are believed to be easier to solve with more memory. A concrete example is the discrete logarithm problem in prime fields. Here is a memory time plot for the discrete log problem in prime fields where the time and memory are in log scale. As we can see, the problem becomes easier to solve with sufficient memory. Let us say again that we want a scheme that is secure against all adversaries constrained in time and memory by this point A. If our reduction now uses significantly more memory than A, we end up with an algorithm whose resources suffice to break the discrete log problem. Again, this does not lead any meaningful conclusions about the security of our scheme. In Crypto 17, Auerbach, Cash, First, and Kiltz introduced the notion of memory tight reductions, where they advocate that on top of a reduction being tight in terms of advantage and computational time, it is also important that the reduction be tight with respect to memory. Going back to our previous example, if we have a memory tight reduction, then we end up with an algorithm that's in a secure region of the problem P, even for a massively larger computational time. Our work is motivated by this observation, and we aim to give proofs that are tight with respect to time, advantage, and memory. We refer to such proofs as time-tight proofs. We focus particularly on the time tightness of public key encryption schemes in the KMDEM paradigm. To recall, to encrypt a message M with an encryption key EK in the KMDEM paradigm, we first run the KEM to spit out a symmetric key K and its encapsulation C1. We then use this symmetric key K and the DEM to encrypt the message M and get ciphertext C2. The tuple C1, C2 is then returned as the ciphertext. This construction can be analyzed as three separate components. The first being the key encapsulation mechanism. Various key encapsulation mechanisms were studied by Bhattacharya in Asiacrypt 2020 in the memory-aware setting, where they gave memory-tight proofs for two flavors of the hashtag Gamal chems, and also for Fujisaki Okamoto transformations, which are used to instantiate chems from PKE schemes. However, these proofs were in a single challenge setting. In our work, we advocate the study of CCA security of schemes in the multi-challenge setting. This is motivated by the simple fact that schemes get deployed across multiple users, each of whom use the scheme multiple times. And the expectation is that the security does not degrade with users or queries. The second component of this construction is the symmetric key encryption scheme, or the DEM. This has not yet been analyzed in the light of memory tightness and remains to be an interesting open question. For our work, we focus on the public key components of this construction and assume that a symmetric key encryption scheme of sufficient security is available to us. The third and final component of this construction is the composition in the KMDEM paradigm, which was studied by Koshal, Kosal, Jaeger, and Tesero in Eurocrypt 2022. Where they used a message encoding technique to time-tightly prove the security of PKE schemes in such constructions and reduce it to the CCA security of the underlying components. However, this reduction relies on a specific construction for the underlying KEM. We extend this work and give proofs for the composition, which are independent of the underlying KEM. As we said earlier, we advocate the study of schemes in the multi-challenge setting. The extension of results from the single challenge setting to the multi-challenge setting is non-trivial. To see why, let us consider CCA security, which is considered the gold standard in concrete security analysis. Here's the CCA security game for some key encapsulation mechanism in the random oracle model. In a single challenge setting, the adversary is given access to three oracles, Enc, Dec, and O. When the adversary queries the Enc oracle, she gets back a special ciphertext key pair that we refer to as the challenge ciphertext key pair. Recall that in a single challenge setting, the adversary is only allowed to query Enc once. Subsequently, when the adversary queries Dec on a ciphertext, the Dec oracle checks if this ciphertext equals the challenge ciphertext, and if so, returns the underlying challenge key, and otherwise returns honest decapsulations. To prove the security of this game, we need to write out a reduction that simulates these oracles for the adversary. When we extend this to the multi-challenge setting, note that there are multiple challenge ciphertext key pairs. This means that to accurately simulate the DEC oracle, the reduction now needs to remember all these challenge ciphertext key pairs, which inherently makes it not memory tight. Additionally, the reduction also needs to identify challenge secrets in a random oracle simulation. We will shortly get to what we mean by challenge secrets. Finally, the reduction needs to ensure that the outputs from DEC and O are consistent. Before we get into the technicalities of our proof techniques, I would like to highlight our contributions. First, we give time-tight proofs for augmented versions of various chems in the multi-user, multi-challenge setting. Specifically, we study variants of the #Gamal chem and reduce its security time-tightly to the CDH problem of the underlying group. We also study the Fujisaki-Okamoto transformation and reduce the security of these schemes to the in-CPA security of the underlying public key encryption scheme. For our proof of the ECIES variant of #Gamal, we introduce a new CDH variant that we refer to as pair CDH. Finally, we lift our results for the chem to time-tightly prove the security of PKE schemes in the ChemDem paradigm. Here, I will briefly introduce #Gamal chems because in the interest of time for this talk, we will only be covering 2 variants of #Gamal chems and associated proof techniques. Here are the 2 versions we'll be talking about today, namely ECIES and Kramer-Shoup. As we can notice, these schemes are very similar in that their key generation algorithms are the same. Both schemes sample a uniformly random group element and assign it as the ciphertext Y. Both schemes also compute a special value that we refer to as the secret and denote by Z, which is computed as EK to the Y. The difference between these 2 schemes lies in how they derive the symmetric encryption key. While ECIES derives the symmetric encryption key as the hash of the secret Z, Kramer-Shoup derives the symmetric encryption key as the hash of both the ciphertext and the secret Z. Notice that the security of both these schemes reduces to the adversary's ability to query the random oracle on the secret Z. This is a very CDH-like challenge. Naturally, we reduce the security of these schemes to the CDH security of the underlying group. If we recall, in a CDH chem, the reduction is given inputs X and Y and is tasked with finding G to the XY. In the multi-challenge version of this game, the reduction is given X and a set of YIs and wins the multi-challenge version of the game if it outputs G to the XYI for any YI. Using Diffie-Hellman re-randomization techniques, we are able to time-tightly prove that the multi-challenge version is implied by the single challenge version. Let's go back to the CCA security game for ECIES. Again, our adversary is given access to 3 oracles, ENC, DEC, and H. When the adversary makes the ith query to ENC, she gets back the ith challenge ciphertext key pair YI-KI, where KI is computed as the hash of the challenge secret Z, which is YI to the X. When she queries DEC on a ciphertext Y, she gets back honest encapsulations, and on querying the hash oracle on an input Z, she gets back H of Z. Let us attempt to write out a reduction for this game. If we recall, our reduction gets as input X in a set of YIs. To simulate the encapsulation key, the reduction simply returns its input X. To simulate the ith ENC query, the reduction now returns its ith input YI and simulates KI as H prime of YI, where H prime is some other random function. Now to simulate DEC, the reduction simply returns H prime of Y. And to simulate the random oracle, the reduction can return H to Z. If we recall the goals of our reduction from earlier, we see that in this reduction, we do not need to remember challenge ciphertext key pairs anymore. However, this reduction fails to identify challenge secrets in the simulated random oracle And it also fails to maintain consistency of outputs between the simulated random oracle and SIMDEC. A standard proof would approach these challenges by reducing to a variant of CDH that is called the strong CDH, which is the same as CDH, except that the reduction is also given oracle access to this oracle strong, which returns true if XYZ form a valid Diffie-Hellman tuple and false otherwise. Now, to identify challenge secrets inside SIMH, the reduction invokes the strong oracle for all challenge ciphertexts. If strong of YI holds for any YI, the reduction can output the corresponding Z and win the underlying strong CDH game. Notice that now the reduction needs to invoke the strong oracle for each challenge ciphertext on each SIMH query. This makes the reduction not tight in terms of memory. Now, to maintain consistent outputs between SIMDEC and SIMH, we maintain tables that store queries to SIMDEC and SIMH. Now, each time the adversary queries SIMDEC on an input Y, the reduction check if there was a previous query to SIMH that corresponds to this input Y. This is checked by invoking the strong oracle again. If strong of YZ holds, it means that Y corresponds to a previous query Z made to SIMH. And in that case, we return the same value that we returned earlier from SIMH as H of C. A similar check is also performed inside of SIMH. Now we're able to maintain consistent outputs between these two oracles. We don't change the construction of SIMENC. If we recall the cause of our reduction again, we see that this standard proof allows us to attain all goals that we outlined earlier. Unfortunately, this reduction is not time or memory tied. But Acharya presented an improvement to this standard proof in Asiacrypt 2020, and they call this technique mapped in hash. This technique assumes the existence of efficient pairings in the underlying group. In this technique, inside SIMH, we now respond to hash queries by first applying a pairing to the input Z and the generator of the group G. We then output the hash of this value. Notice that this is the same as directly computing the hash because the composition of an injection and a random function is a random function. To maintain consistency between all oracles, inside SIMENC and SIMDEC, we define H prime as H applied to the pair of X and Y. This allows us to maintain perfect consistency between H prime and H because pair of XY equals pair of GZ if and only if strong of YZ holds. So we're able to maintain consistency for free by computing the hash in such a backdoored manner. However, the reduction still needs to check against each challenge ciphertext to identify challenge secrets within SIMH. This makes our reduction not tight in terms of time. Also, this reduction assumes the existence of efficient pairings in the underlying group. And such groups are slower in practice. In our work, we give techniques that avoid both these challenges. First, we address how we can avoid checking against each challenge ciphertext in SIMH. For this, we augment the scheme with uniformly random strings. These uniformly random strings are now included as part of each ciphertext and also as part of each hash query. We can then use the message encoding technique of GGJT in the proof. To do this, we program the random string A for the ith enc query as an encoding of I. Now, in SIMH, we can decode A to obtain I, and instead of checking against each challenge ciphertext, we only check against one challenge ciphertext. This yields a time-tight proof in the multi-challenge setting, but still assumes the existence of an efficient pairing in the underlying group. It's interesting to note that the pairing is only used in the security proof and is never really used in the actual construction of the protocol. This motivated us to define a new variant of CDH, which we call per CDH. It is quite similar to CDH, except that it also gives the reduction Oracle access to a pairing to a random group. For a kind of sanity check, we proved that pair CDH is secure in the algebraic and generic group models. The study of the security of pair CDH is also an interesting future work. Orthogonally, in this talk, we have only addressed the multi-challenge setting. To extend our work to the multi-user setting is a fairly easy extension. We can now program the random string AI as an encoding of both the user identifier and the challenge counter, instead of it being the encoding of just the challenge counter. With that, we move on to the next scheme, Kramer-Shoup, which, as we discussed, is super similar to ECIES, except in a way that it derives the symmetric encryption key. It derives the symmetric encryption key as the hash of both the challenge ciphertext and the challenge secret. Unsurprisingly, we start motivating our proof comparably to ECIES. We start with the same incorrect reduction, which is unable to maintain consistency between DEC and edge, and is also unable to identify challenge secrets inside SIMH. The standard proof, again, is almost exactly similar to that we discussed for ECIES. And unfortunately, again, this is neither time nor memory tight. Again, we are able to apply Bhattacharya's map-thin hash technique here. It's nice to note that we no longer require efficient pairings in the underlying group, because SIMH receives as input both Y and Z. And we define our injection now such that H of YZ is computed as H of Y and a special symbol star if strong of YZ holds, and is computed as H of YZ otherwise. Again, the composition of this injection and random function yields a random function. Once again, our reduction still needs to check against each ciphertext to be able to identify challenge secrets within SIMH, and this makes it not time-tight. The same augmentation as before yields us a time-tight proof in the multi-challenge setting. The difference lies in the fact that now extension to the multi-user setting does not come from programming the random string as an encoding of both the user identifier and the challenge counter. Instead, we need to doubly augment our scheme. We also augment the encapsulation key with a random string alpha and include it in all hash queries. In the proof, we can program alpha, or the per user random string, as an encoding of U, and we can program AI, or the per ciphertext random string, as an encoding of I. With that, I would like to conclude the talk by recapturing our contributions in this work and highlighting the proofs that we discussed today. And that's it. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot for your talk. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, I have a stupid question. So you said you have a memory tied and time and memory tied reduction from a single channel strong development to the multi-channel strong development. But I just confused for the multi-channel strong development, it would take n pieces of memory, right? How can it be tied, memory tied? Because you extend a single challenge to a multi-challenge, and multi-challenge will take more memory, right?
So the idea is to use a re-randomization that allows us to capture exactly what challenge yi the adversary is trying to give back queries to, so that we don't need a table of sorts to store all challenge ciphertexts. The reduction already has it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the nice talk. I was a bit confused. You give an encryption oracle to a public key primitive. So usually, I mean, the adversary knows the public key, so they can just encrypt themselves. And it seems a bit as if this is crucial to embed the message encoding.
I think that extends from the standard CCA game, where the adversary is given a real random choice of a real or random ciphertext and needs to identify which one of those it's playing. So it still receives a ciphertext, which is what we capture
So-
using the ENC oracle.
So that is the challenge oracle.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
a challenge
thanks.
oracle. Yeah.
Great. Are there,
Thanks for the talk. I was wondering, so did I understand it correctly that in order to give these TAM type reductions, you augmented the scheme slightly?
Yes.
Do you have a feeling for if it would be possible to give TAM type reductions for the non-augmented schemes? Or
No, we were not able to give TAM-type proofs for the non-augmented schemes. An interesting result for non-augmented schemes is that we can pick and choose any two out of TAM. So we can either have it time and advantage tied, or advantage and memory tied, or time and memory tied, but we cannot have all three unless we augment the scheme.
thanks.
awesome. Thanks a lot. Are there any other questions? Well, if not, let's thank Akshay again. And that concludes the session. Thank you all for coming.